Hello and welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Houghteling, FranklinCovey's head of product. In these conversations, we speak with many of the world's experts on the mistakes, mindsets, and methods that help them become the people they are today. We hope that their hard-earned insights help accelerate you on your journey. Today's podcast is a little bit different. Instead of sharing a one-on-one conversation, we're bringing you a recording of a recent panel I led at FranklinCovey's Impact Conference about the impact of AI. In this panel, you'll hear from three experts. First, Amanda Brophy, Director of Grow with Google. Second, Sumeet Chabria, the founder and CEO of ThoughtLinks and the former global CEO of technology and operations at Bank of America. And Kathi Enderes, the SVP of Research at the Josh Bersin Company. In this conversation, we'll discuss the ways that AI is changing the world of work and how leaders can not only survive but thrive in this new world. We hope you enjoy the conversation. AI is on everyone's mind right now. It is referenced in every meeting. It is seemingly in every headline. It is central to every long-term planning strategy session. Leaders are being told everywhere, if they don't move fast, they will fall behind. But through all of the hype, many leaders are starting to ask important questions about this foundational technology. They're beginning to ask, are we applying AI to solve real problems, or are we doing it just because we don't want to be left out? Are we working smarter or just faster? Are our people really ready for this technology, or are we just purchasing products and calling that progress? And ultimately, and most importantly, as the technology gets smarter, are we getting wiser by harnessing it? These are many of the conversations and questions that are at the core of this moment. As AI has moved from the edges of experimentation to the center of our day-to-day, it has redefined work, workers, and the workplace. For many, this is scary. For many, it's exciting. For many, it's both. Ultimately, AI presents both opportunities and challenges. A challenge to blend humanity and technology. An opportunity to unleash human potential, creativity, and yes, efficiency in a way that's likely never been possible before. That's what today's conversation will be about. I am fortunate to be joined by a panel of experts who have spent decades thinking about the future and role of technology, leadership, and human performance. They have not only seen but led AI and digital transformation at many household organizations. So let's meet our panelists. First, we have Sumeet Chabria, the former Global Chief Operating Officer for Technology and Operations at Bank of America, where he led a 90,000 person team across 30 countries. That's a lot of one-on-one, Sumeet. Since leaving Bank of America, Sumeet is now the founder and CEO of ThoughtLinks, a premier strategic consulting firm where he works with Fortune 500 companies on transformation and AI adoption and deployments. Second, we're joined by Kathi Enderes, Senior Vice President at the Josh Bersin Group. Josh Bersin is one of the leading, if not the leading HR technology consulting firms, where in that work, Kathi will partner with companies on their technology, leadership, and performance strategy. Kathi joined Bersin after 20 years of consulting work at IBM, PwC, Ernst & Young, and was a leader in the HR field directly as an operator at McKesson and Kaiser. In the last year, Kathi and the Bersin Group has focused a lot on AI implementations and has built their own AI products, Galileo and Galileo Learn, which you'll hear more about today. Last but not least, we're joined by Henry Deng from one of the world's leading AI companies, Google. Henry is a strategic partnership lead for Google's Grow with Google initiative, a $1 billion commitment to using technology to increase economic opportunity through training and partnerships. Prior to working at Google, Henry worked on upskilling and human transformation at Guild, Accenture, and various startups prior to that. So enormous thank you to our panelists for joining us today. So why don't we go ahead and jump in? I'm going to start with an easy one. How is AI changing leadership? And I'm going to start, and not actually an easy one, joke to begin, but I'm going to start, Kathi, with you. How is AI changing the role of leaders today?
Yeah, that's first. Thanks for having me. Super excited to join you all. And thank you, everybody, for calling in from around the world. I was watching where everybody is from. And it's humbling and exciting to see that we have an audience around the world. So thank you for that. Well, we talk about AI, of course, with every conversation we have. We're a research and advisory company for the HR profession, but we talk with every company about the role of AI in work, but then also the role of leaders. And leaders, there's one school of thought that says maybe we need less leaders. Maybe we can automate a lot of the things that leaders can do. And we get these questions from our constituents, from HR people, a lot, right? Couldn't AI do a lot of the administrative things, I don't know, maybe even coaching people, maybe even submitting, like approving time cards or whatever leaders or managers do. And there's the other school of thoughts what we actually subscribe to, that leaders become even more important in AI. And one quote that stuck with me, I'm at a lot of conferences, and a couple of weeks ago I was at a big conference, HR technology conference in Paris, and the CHRO of Microsoft was speaking, Amy Coleman, and she said, the more we talk about AI, the more we have to talk about people. And I think that's the notion that we have to think about, because leaders can actually help close that gap or bring that gap faster together when AI is actually moving very, very fast. And we as individuals and as organizations are not that fast to absorb that, right? I see a lot of AI announcements. Every HR tech company that we work with, they're announcing we have launched 50 new agents for recruiting and for payroll and for compensation and all those kind of things. Meanwhile, organizations are not that fast to adopt that. And who can actually close that gap between kind of how fast technology moves and what time we need as individuals to absorb and put that into our workflows and work in different ways is leaders. So it's actually amplifying, AI is really amplifying the role of leaders in this new world. And new leadership behaviors, or maybe old leadership behaviors, what always made good leaders kind of great, are really more important than ever. So you talked about, and I think we saw in the video, the importance of trust, for example, the importance of psychological safety, the importance of fostering curiosity and experimentation and ongoing learning. All of those are behaviors that always made kind of the characteristics of excellent leaders. So human-centered leadership is even more important now than ever before.
So same question to you, Sumeet. How do you think that AI is changing the role of leaders?
I think, look, I agree with Kathi that leadership is more important than ever now in the AI age. At the core, though, leadership doesn't change at the core. I mean, the core job of leaders is still to set tone, set context, set the strategy for their teams, prioritize, and be the people that could frame the business problem or the challenge for their team. So that doesn't change. What does change is how work gets done, to Kathy's point, and it's going to change substantially. So leaders need to have some new muscles, and they need to sharpen build some muscles they already have. They've got to be more flexible, adaptable. We in a day today and age where the pace of innovation is the biggest challenge I hear from leaders. It's too much happening at the same time, and it's getting more complex before it gets easier, right? If it gets easier. So I think being adaptable, not having all the answers, flexible, being able to bust the hierarchy that they're used to. Sometimes the best answers may be 4 or 5 levels below them, or the graduate that started. Embracing innovation, being more creative, thinking outside the box. So I think leaders need to change. It's not going to be as easy and cookie cutter going forward. The way they did it, and fundamentally, work is going to change. And so they need to figure out and navigate that. So change management also becomes very important. So those are some of the things how I think leadership will change.
So Henry, you're a leader yourself. How has AI changed how you lead? How has AI changed how you work? And the more tactical, the better.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Will, and thanks for having me. I think 3 main areas where I'd focus on as a leader. I think first off, I think the importance of being a visionary for leaders is more important than ever. I think as we hear all this chatter, some skepticism around the ROI around just deploying AI, where we've actually seen the highest ROI come out and returns from organizations is when it's directly tied to strategy. We've actually seen AI teams embedded within the business strategy team, and that be really effective for some organizations. But bottom line is, whether you're leading a small team, a large organization, you're responsible for thinking about where that team should go, where it's coming from, and then how you deploy your resources, whether human or AI. And so that visionary component, I think, is more important than ever. The second one, which might be a little bit new, is leaders as designers. And when I say designers, I mean designers of workflows within the teams. And so what things are handled by humans and what's handled by AI, and where does that interact? Our chief marketing officer here at Google, Lorraine, the other day, actually heard her say, in the past, whenever we're designing a campaign, teams would develop storyboards, agencies would develop storyboards, and she frankly said, I don't want to ever see a storyboard again. Bring it to me in a mock-up. We can generate images, we can generate videos using AI, and that fundamentally changes the workflow. And so that designer piece is really important. And then I think the last piece is leaders as a coach. And so that's not new, but I think specifically where I've seen the importance come out here is really coaching around fundamentally human skills. And so how do you coach team members around discernment and decision-making, ethical decision-making around when to use AI or what outputs you're getting? And how do you think about then collaboration and communication, some of these durable skills? And I think that as some of the technical skills maybe get taken over by AI, or some of those tasks get taken over, that the importance of a coach is really, really fundamental for team members around human skills.
Wonderful. I think that's a really helpful framework, Henry, to think about leaders as visionaries, leaders as designers, leaders as coaches, and to rethink our own role in those three different capacities. I think that's wonderful. Kathi, you mentioned earlier about all of these companies launching agents. You obviously at Bersin are at the forefront of the AI ecosystem, and you're really at the cutting edge of what's happening. Maybe if you could briefly explain a 101 on what are agents. You hear this word shared a lot. So what are AI agents? And then I have a follow-up after that. But let's start with the 101 before I go to 201.
And it's a little bit intimidating to say that in front of somebody from Google, obviously, who works with Google, because I'm probably not the technically best person to explain that. But I'll explain it how we explain it to our constituents, who are HR people and learning and development people and talent acquisition people, who are actually not technically, I think they're not AI builders, obviously, but they could eventually be AI builders. Well, we distinguish between this generative AI that's more assistive in nature, that basically just helps you get answers, and agentic AI, where the agent actually does something in a backend system. So they're not just giving you an answer, not just like ChatGPT or any of the Copilot, any of the Gemini, any of the assistive features, but they are actually doing something in a backend system. So when you put this into an HR and learning and development context, for example, they're not just telling you maybe how you rewrite a course title of an e-learning course, but they help you. Basically, they make you upload maybe a piece of content, and then you can ask it, can you create a learning course for me? And it can do that for you. And you can give it the specs, and it can actually do something for you. So those are agents that actually do something for you, not just give you an answer to that. So there's many of these agents, of course, that all of these HR tech companies and other companies, of course, too, in other areas like sales and marketing and all of that develop. It's actually bringing up an interesting question about leaders, because if these are almost like people because they actually do work for you, should we manage them like people? So we get that question all the time. Are those people that are on the team, should we humanize them? And I have a very strong opinion on that. But my perspective is humanizing them is quite intimidating and quite dangerous for your employee population, because we've had things that automated things and did something in backend systems for many decades, right? You could always set up, for example, a new hire in your payroll system. Once you got somebody from your recruiting system, it set them up in your HR system. So that was already kind of like an agent. It was an automation, right? So where does it start? Where does it end? And if we are personalizing them, we are attributing them characteristics that they don't have. They're not actually people. They don't actually want something. They are really prediction machines, right? They are algorithms. And I think it's really important to put that into that perspective, because otherwise we're saying, well, if this person, that's almost a person, never sleeps, and this person never gets sick, and this person never gets tired, this person on the team will be much better than me because it can work 24 hours a day and it never makes mistakes and all of that. So that's kind of how I see these agents fit in there. I feel it's a better way to think about them as tools to amplify what people do, not as taking away from what people do.
Well, you saw my 101 and you raised me directly to the 201, which is where I was going, which is great. So, Sumeet, I'm going to ask the same 201 question to you. So there are agents that, as Kathi is saying, are tools that can allow us to get work done. Holly Proctor, who led today's session, our president of enterprises, often said that in the future, people will be managing both teams of human and teams of agents. What skills do you think we need to effectively manage agents? And should we be thinking, Sumeet, about agents as members of our team, or should we think about them as something else entirely?
Look, I think I'm going to say something that may be controversial. I don't think you should give agents human equivalents, that for sure. But I think we have to recognize that by the fact that we have agentic AI over time, we are going to have a digital workforce, right? So if an agent talks like us, walks like us, engages like us, does the similar activities and mimics our behavior and characteristics, at some point, we can't say it's not a member of the workforce. Now, that doesn't mean they are humans. That doesn't mean we give them the same, standing in our society. But I think there's a risk of not recognizing that a workforce is emerging, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to secretly have work we do move to agents, right? So take a team that does communication or marketing. I mean, the great example from before, and a part of marketing and launch of any of these, media stuff gets done by agents in the background, and they do it the way like we did. Then I think that we are going to have a transfer of work going to AI at a pace that we've never seen before without even recognizing it. So I do think that we have to sort of apply some workflows disciplines to agentic AI, because we have learned them over we've built leadership and workforce disciplines over hundreds of years. Might as well apply them to at least have a shadow workforce is forming here. So I do think that we have to treat them part of the workforce, whether we put them in Workday, give them a payroll, give them a bonus, give them a performance review is different. But even sort of like having metrics that says that, how do you know the computer is going to do it better than you? AI is going to do it better than you if you can't even measure and monitor and have different metrics to measure your performance. So I do think you have to start to think about it in terms of workforce disciplines and being workforce aware versus not. Now, any counterpoint I'd like to debate.
I think that's great. I think that ties actually very much to what Henry said earlier about leaders as designers, and particularly designers of workflows, and that we're designing the workflows for agents. Henry, coming to you. So as we think about getting agents into our mix and designing workflows, where do you suggest people start? How, for somebody that's just gotten familiar with using Gemini or ChatGPT, it feels like they're going from the 101 to the 201. How do they get engaged with agents and putting agents to work for them?
Yeah, I think one of the key things to really discern around agents or AI tools in general is this distinction between automation and augmentation, I think. And that's really, really important. And I'll provide an anecdote here, kind of dated anecdote here, but it's an unfortunate incident where this distinction didn't go right in Air France 447. It's a flight in 2009 that ended tragically, but what happened was that the pilots were relying on autopilot, and that was going well until ice crystals interfered, and then essentially the pilots didn't know what to do in that situation, because they had become so comfortable and so reliant on the system that their skills were a bit rusty. And so when they had to take the wheel or take the cockpit, they actually weren't able to control the stall, and the plane ended tragically. But I think one of the core lessons there was that, as we roll out these tools, in many cases, they're not fully ready to completely take over certainly not entire jobs, but even when they're taking over certain tasks, there's still the importance of human in the loop, and then the importance of that human knowing what to do when the outputs aren't there, or when they need to step in. And so continue to reinforce those skills, making sure that humans aren't completely hands off in these situations, and kind of recognizing those differences around automation and augmentation is really, really important.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's what you just said, Henry. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. What you just said, Henry, also reminds me of a study that I just read, that 45% of the answers that are created with generative AI are actually incorrect. 45%, right? So if we don't check what these answers are, if we are not in the middle, and everybody in a way becomes then, to your point, Sumeet, maybe a leader of AI, right? Because everybody is using these AI tools. It's not just formal managers or leaders anymore. Everybody manages and leads these AI tools if we want to personalize them. We also need to double check and make sure that we are critically evaluating what's happening, and basically if the answers are correct. By the way, I feel the younger generation is actually good at this. I have 2 teenagers at home, and I know there's always the thought that the younger generation, the Gen Z, is becoming entirely dependent on AI, and they are not critically thinking. I see the opposite working there, actually, because they've always had to critically evaluate the results of their studies, right? Even when they used Google to Google previously, before they had AI, they always had to look, is this something that I can trust? And they're using AI actually in new ways. So I asked my teenagers, my girls, my 14-year-old uses it not to give her the answer to her math homework, but to teach her how to get to the answer. So that's a different way of thinking about it, right? This is not just an answer machine. It's actually something that can teach you, and we have to teach it. So basically we can go multi-directional on this way. So I totally agree with you, Henry. It needs to be like humans need to be in the loop there, not just trust on it.
Well, I think kudos to you, Kathi, as a parent. I think there's a lot of kids out there that unfortunately probably are using it as an answering machine. I saw an interesting chatter going on in the comments about people using it to write essays for schoolwork and whatnot. But I think that maybe you've led by example with your daughter about combining human intelligence and artificial intelligence to create this hybrid intelligence that's better than either independently. So the last question on this topic of how AI is impacting leadership and kind of us as individuals comes from the audience, from Anita Riley. And she asked, do you believe any leadership skills are becoming obsolete due to AI? And on the contrary, are there any new skills emerging because of AI enhancements? So what skills that we have as leaders are obsolete, and what is more important than before? And Sumeet, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, as I said before, there's nothing I think will become obsolete. I just think we have to apply some skills more as leaders, right? We have to, I think this great point on Kathi made and Henry's made, and we have intuition, we have judgment. These are great skills. I give you an example of when I didn't apply it. My mom was here many years ago visiting me, and she said my milk was bad. And I looked at the milk a gallon of milk what I had, and it said 2 more days for expiration. And I go by the expiration date. She actually opens it and smells it and says it's bad, throw it out. Well, and that's a skill that I had lost, right? Verification, trust and verify. And I think there are lots of these other skills that we need to sort of get. And the other one is navigating complexity. We have to embrace that there is going to be a level of complexity and things that we don't know, we can't see, but need to navigate it. So I don't actually think many skills go away. Our behaviors have to change, and we have to embrace more skills.
Absolutely. So I agree. And I saw somebody put it in comment, smell the milk, smell the milk. I agree. And I think that human judgment is kind of probably more important than ever before, given the pace of kind of AI generated answers. We need to be the ones that are evaluating the accuracy of those. So I now want to go from the individual to the collective and talk about implementation at organizations as a whole. Earlier, when Holly asked in the crowd for people to share about what they view the role of AI as, there was just a stream of answers coming through, and a lot of said efficiency and productivity and speed and whatnot. And so a lot of organizations are looking to see how they can apply AI to improve their efficiency, speed, and productivity as a company. So I want to start maybe, Kathi, with you. Could you share an example of an organization that has effectively leveraged AI to improve productivity, efficiency, and outcomes? What do they do that was so special?
Yeah, one great story, and it's so relatable because we've all experienced it or been there, is McDonald's. So a great story of McDonald's. They, of course, as you know, they need to hire people really fast. Oftentimes they hire teenagers or young people, basically, and they want to hire, of course, reduce their time of hiring people dramatically, because it used to take them 2 weeks to interview somebody, to basically get them on board. And 2 weeks doesn't seem that long if you think about kind of maybe a technology worker or maybe an HR person, but it's very long when you think about kind of somebody who flips burgers in the restaurant, right? So they wanted to decrease their time to hire, get people on board really quickly. And what they did is they used an AI-based recruiting system, basically, to ask people, when they were buying kind of meals or something, on the app, it would come up and it would say, would you like a job with that meal? And so you could basically say, yes, I would actually, as a matter of fact, I would like to work here. And you could just indicate if you're authorized to work there, when you can work, what shifts you can work. And immediately you could basically go to the store maybe that day or maybe the next day. And so they reduced their time to hire from 2 weeks to 2 days for their frontline workers using AI, because they cut completely the point of resumes and all that overblown system that you don't need for somebody who is working at a fast food restaurant. So they basically made that hiring as fast as fast food. But it wasn't that easy, because McDonald's is actually, from a change perspective, they're of course a franchise, right? So they couldn't dictate that everybody should use these AI tools, basically this AI tool, because everybody can basically decide what they want to do. So from a change perspective, this was actually a really interesting change management exercise where they had the franchise owners basically involved much earlier on, from evaluating systems that could do that all the way to roll out and how they would roll it out and all of that. So behind the scenes, while the AI seemed to be the amazing thing, what's actually more amazing was how they worked through the change perspective from the owner's perspective and from the franchise kind of perspective, because it's not an easy thing to change that, how organizations or how these restaurants kind of hire people. So that was a great example, because the outcome was really what they wanted to have. It was also time to hire went down, of course, cost of hire went down too. And the candidates liked it better because they could stay on their phone, right? And they didn't need a resume, because oftentimes, I don't know about your teenagers, but my teenagers don't have a resume because they haven't started yet, working yet. So that's just one example where they did actually what mattered to the business using AI. And that's, I think, a great example of thinking about what problem you have and then applying AI to that problem. Not starting, here's AI and what could I apply it to? It's kind of a hammer looking for a nail, right? But the other way around, what's the problem that we have? And in their case, they couldn't hire people fast enough, and now they can.
That's a great. I love your insight to close there about it's about identifying problems and applying AI rather than the other way around, saying AI is going to be the solution and now let's go searching for the specific problems. Henry, turn to you. How does an AI company use AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say that Google has been using AI for well over a decade here, whether it is in our spam filters in Gmail or the way that we're serving the best search results. But as far as I'll talk about within Google and then also outside of Google, I think we have some pretty compelling examples that we're seeing with other companies that we work with. But within Google, it's really an imperative across different functions. If you think about the core of what Google's doing, we have a lot of software engineers, and over 30% of our code is now generated by AI. And that's really compelling in that I was talking to a software engineer the other day here, and what they were saying was that whereas their job used to be coding, now their primary job and core skill set is around communication. And so communication is both understanding the requirements around what you're building. It is then communicating what you're building to the AI, to the generative AI tool, or if they're vibe coding, to develop a prototype. And so that communication is key. And then on the back end, it's really around discernment of the outputs and fixing bugs, and then communicating those out to other teams and cross-functional folks and working with users. And I thought that was really interesting. Software engineers going from coding to communications. And then we're using, of course, in other areas, whether it's to process invoices across millions of invoices across different suppliers. And we're using it in marketing campaigns, like I mentioned before. Our sales team is leveraging AI extensively to qualify leads, to help get started around RFPs. But I think one really powerful example that I'll call on outside of Google is we recently in October hosted about 70 different chief AI officers and HR officers here at Google to really ask them, hey, what case studies have really resonated and landed at your organizations? And one in particular was at HCA Healthcare. So they have, I think, about 190 different hospitals, largely around the center of the US. And they were focused on using AI around one of the most critical challenges in healthcare, which is around handoffs. And so when your healthcare provider is signing off and going home for the day and then handing off to another doctor or nurse, that handoff period is actually one of the most intense periods for potential accidents or incidents. And so what they were doing is leveraging Gemini and building a tool. They could actually help their nurses gather some of the data around their care. And the AI tool would help synthesize that, make sure that's really clear. And for that next caretaker, they're able to quickly get the information, make sure that it's accurate. They actually saw over a 50% reduction in the time that was spent in handoffs. And so that really helps the nurses and healthcare workers. But then they also increased in terms of accuracy. And then at the end of the day, in terms of reducing incidents, which I think literally saves lives, which I thought was really, really powerful.
That is a very powerful example. I want to go back to a previous example you gave about engineers as moving from coders to communicators and having a lot of the software itself be written by AI. It's transforming them to communicators. It's also transforming them into editors. And maybe that's kind of what you meant by communicators. There was a good question that came in via chat from John Atwood about how we can build the critical thinking skills and processes to evaluate AI's output. So how is Google stressing to people to judge and evaluate AI's output before just passing it along or approving code?
Yeah, this actually goes back, I think, to the theme of this whole session, which is around leadership and management. I think it starts at that level of really striking that balance of encouraging teams to really lean in and leverage these tools, but on the other end, really questioning, what the outputs are. And this hasn't necessarily changed over time in that I started my career in consulting, and when we would have new analysts coming in and whether it's doing analysis or building slides, I think there was a lot of that questioning I would do of where did this come from? How do you defend it? And similar thing. And if someone just kind of says, oh, this is something that AI generated, right? Like stressing that that's not good enough, right? Understanding what the sources are and building that muscle. I think it's something that we all can do in the workplace, and then it probably starts earlier than that in K-12 education, in higher education, and stressing those critical skill sets early on as well.
Absolutely. It's a systemic issue. It's both within the work and it's even earlier in education to teach people to think more critically about all of the output of AI. I love that. Sumeet, there were a lot of conversations and comments, or there were a lot of comments in the chat earlier about the importance of AI to drive efficiency, speed, and productivity. I want to ask about AI increasing quality and creativity, though, kind of different outputs and outcomes.
Yeah.
What organizations have you worked with, or what examples have you seen of AI improving the quality, not just the quantity or the speed of work?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I actually just I'm working with a company under NDA, so I can't say it, but it's been now 6 months, and it's all about customer experience. And in this organization, good nature of the business, they've got a lot of customer complaints, right? They've got a log of customer servicing needs, complaints, and it takes 6 to 7 days to resolve a complaint. A lot of calls come to tens of thousands of calls come to a call center that for customers. So I think the focus of this organization was not about efficiency and productivity. They could have taken that angle, and and they may have lost out on the other outcomes like quality, to your point, right? And so they took the angle of quality. How do we resolve customer? How do we make customers increase customer delight? They use AI not just to improve how calls are coming to the call center and agentic AI sort of monitoring the calls with them with customer consent and nudging the call center agents, making them more productive, so they can resolve things quicker. But they will also go through the log of customer complaints to really understand the root cause of why customers are complaining in the first place and what's causing them to raise the complaint and help resolve the root cause. So I think that's a great example of an organization that's improved 30% reduction of customer complaints, time to resolution, and created new metrics on this. So I do think at times efficiency will come as a byproduct of other objectives and other outcomes, but chasing efficiency only can cost you a lot. Cost you trust, cost you quality, cost you on other outcome metrics.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I just wanted to jump in because we actually get this question a lot too. And we established for the HR and learning and development and talent acquisition, all of those areas, we established like a 4E framework for outcomes. So we say efficiency is the first one. And of course, that's always easy to quantify and easy to say, right? Is it faster? Do people save time? But then we go also to the next E, which is the employee experience. So is it better for employees when you, for example, have a better learning course that's personalized or something like that, or learning experience? It's a better learning experience, or for the candidates that apply to McDonald's, it's a better experience to just answer a few questions on the phone than having to apply from a computer. So that's employee experience. The third E is the effectiveness. Are we doing the right things? Do we get better quality of hire? Do we get better training material? Do we have better skills of our people, basically? Do we get the right outcomes when we answer employee questions? All of those kind of things. And then last one would be about overall employee productivity. So not just for the HR people to make something faster, but can every employee work better in the organization? Can they use their skills? Can they have a better career? So we always think about all four of these E's, and there's examples of all of them actually already in play if you think about it in that way.
I think that's a really helpful framework, those 4 E's, to talk about how we should be evaluating the success of AI implementations. I want to talk, just to close on this topic of AI implementations, is the collateral damage of AI implementations, which is that oftentimes companies use that, whether in reality or as a cover for layoffs. You see, Amazon had their earnings last week and they announced that they were laying off, I think, 30,000 or maybe it was 14,000 corporate employees, citing increases to efficiency from AI. I want to get your sense, maybe Kathi will come back to you on this as you see it across many different companies, about how companies can create high trust cultures while rolling out AI, knowing that often AI leads to directly or indirectly leads to layoffs.
I mean, and we have to acknowledge that, of course, the AI layoffs are real, right? I mean, it's not imagined. And I know there's studies out there that say like 60% or more of employees are concerned about that. So I think it would be a little bit tone deaf if we wouldn't acknowledge that. And we see this in all areas. Of course, we see it in software developers, we see it in marketing people, not so much in frontline people because their automation already happened early on, right? So I think we see it mostly in the, whatever we want to call them, knowledge workers or white collar workers. But I think what's really important and what we advise CHROs and HR leaders to do is basically acknowledge the fear and be there as transparent as it can be, right? Yes, there might be things that actually happen in our organization. And I mean, CEOs, we hear this all the time, CEOs are asking for savings basically because they invest a lot in AI. So they need to save the money somewhere else. So I just talked with the CHRO of a very large retail company. And she said, our CEO just says 20% across the board. Everybody needs to save 20%. And so that's, of course, going to happen. But I think the other thing that we can do, in addition to being transparent and acknowledging the fear, is helping employees up-level, reskill, kind of be prepared to be, to Henry's point, for example, be better communicators, for example, if they're software engineers, be more talent advisors if you're in recruiting and less about scheduling interviews, be more a performance consultant when you're in learning and development, for example, and not an instructional designer only. All of those kind of things help them kind of see the opportunities where you can actually use the AI to amplify what you're accomplishing for the business rather than seeing it as a competition, what the AI does and what we do. Because what we do as humans, we are good at different things than the AI. The AI can do some things much, much better than us, and some things incredibly worse than us. And I think just using the AI as tools to amplify our own productivity and help employees kind of think about it that way. How can you use the AI? There's a kind of a saying that's been in place for a number of years, and it almost feels sad to repeat it, but I'll repeat it here anyway, that AI won't take your job, but somebody who uses AI will take your job. And I think there's still some truth to that, right? So how can we think about everybody up-leveling to be the people that use the AI and not the ones that compete with the AI?
Absolutely. I think that's I've heard that saying as well. And I think it's a powerful image as well. I guess actually last question on this general topic area came in chat. Henry, this one's for you. It's kind of two questions that are related. One question came in saying, over the course of the last 200 years, there have been many different technological innovations. Every single time a technological innovation has come, people have been worried about jobs being replaced, but we've identified new jobs that have emerged. ATM machines didn't actually replace bank tellers. It changed the job of what a bank teller does. Is this the same? And then the second part of that question is related question that somebody else came in is, how can we effectively upskill people into the jobs of the future? So two-parter for you. It's a big one. But I know given your background at Guild and at Google, I thought you'd have something interesting to share.
I think on the first point, I fundamentally agree on that topic. There's a great article in The Atlantic that James Vanica from Google and David Otter, who's a labor economist at MIT, right, in which they explore this topic. But even the World Economic Forum projects, I believe 92 million jobs potentially being displaced, but over 170 being created net new. And like elephant in the room, there will be some jobs that are fully automated away, maybe 10 to 20%, but then I really think that 60% or so are more augmented, or they will just look different. And I think we're seeing that come, and this is still early innings, and so we're still getting there. Like Will, you touched on it a little bit, but in terms of companies downsizing right now, if you really dig into it, highly unlikely that those jobs are completely automated right now. And so there's a little bit of correlation, causation, and certainly people are worried, and so that heightens that correlation there. But in terms of something for, I think, all of us as business leaders to think about is, as you think about the returns on human capital and then also just productivity, right? There's a numerator and a denominator there. Numerator being outputs, denominator being the inputs. And so cutting that denominator is really easy. And that's something that anybody can do. Any organization can do, cut costs. I think the numerator part is something I'd push us all to think about is, what do you do when you can really serve customers better, reduce incidents, and potentially serve new markets, right? And that's a lot more additive and powerful than potentially just reducing the denominator, which again, anybody can do. And so that's something I push all of us to think about. And then in terms of upskilling, I think within organizations, we're seeing, I think companies really lean in 3 different areas. One is around AI literacy. And so fundamentally understanding when and how to use AI tools. And then for specific use cases, whether it's coding, content creation, writing, we're actually working on a framework that tries to codify what are the key skill domains for leveraging AI that we hope to release early next year. So first off is how to leverage AI. Second is really around human AI interaction. And when to deploy agents, how to work with them, how to do that in a team. And then the last piece is around those human or durable skills, how to cultivate those, whether it's on-the-job upskilling, whether it's coaching, mentoring, other resources. I think that's more important than ever and really helps equip people regardless of the job that they're in.
Cool. Thank you. So there are a lot of comments and questions coming in about how to drive AI adoption. So I want to go on to that next kind of more tactical section of today's conversation. NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, recently said that the last 10 years was really about the science of AI, and the next 10 years is going to be about the application of AI. A recent MIT study shared that 95% of AI pilots fail to drive measurable financial impact. So, Sumeet, you work across many organizations. Why do you think so many AI implementations are failing today?
Look, I think I don't agree with that stat with what I see. I don't see that as bad as 95%. So the challenge with that article was that it didn't really quite tell you how they calculated return on investment, because I don't think for AI you can calculate ROI on a use case by use case basis easily, because companies need to have some infrastructure in place for AI, and there's a one-time investment to be made there. So, but besides the point, I think from what I see, a lot of AI implementations fail because they're too narrow and they focus too much on that little use case. And I think to Henry's point earlier when he was giving the example of coding, that's a great example. If you think of AI just helping coding, then you just focus on making coding better with AI. But if you think of AI as disrupting the software development lifecycle, then you take a step back and say, how do we build software? Why do we build software? What outcomes are we trying to drive? And you look at this whole process most end to end and say, how does AI reshape it? Or how do we redesign it with humans and AI in the loop, on the loop, all of that. So I think most of the times implementations fail because they don't look at the actual work being disrupted by AI. They look at the little narrow use case. And you have to fundamentally rethink about how work needs to be redesigned. Workflows need to be redesigned. Processes need to be redesigned. So AI gets inserted in the right places and amplifies human potential, which is what we all have talked about here. That's the number one reason. It's not failing because I'm seeing tech is not ready yet. Tech is never going to be ready. It's never going to be 100% accurate, but there's ways to implement them. So that would be my core reason, and I'll just stop there.
Awesome. I thank you for that reason. And I also agree. I think that the MIT study, there have been a lot of discussion about the accuracy of that 95% number. And I'm sharing it to be maybe a little bit controversial. But Kathi, same question to you. Why do you think AI implementations are failing, and what should we do about it as we do our own AI implementations?
Well, first, I push back a little bit and I agree with Sumeet on that too. But really, do we need to quantify the financial return of every AI implementation? Because did we quantify when we put in Outlook, for example? Well, how do you quantify that? Are you going to say, we're not going to use Word now because I don't have a financial return, right? Some of these systems are just basically the way of working now. So I think we're putting maybe a different frame on it that's maybe not entirely fair, right? This is the new way of working, and it's kind of happening as it is. So that's the first point on that. Second point on it is, I wouldn't see them necessarily as failures, because whenever it doesn't actually create the right result, it teaches you something what could create the right result, right? Let's say you started with the outcome in mind. You started with we want to increase, I don't know, customer satisfaction in one group, or we want to increase revenue in this area, or we want to get better candidate quality or faster time to hire, whatever we wanted to do. And it doesn't create that outcome. Well, it teaches you something on what went wrong, where did it not go right, where did we fail? So you could see all of these failures as a learning experimentation, not just as a failure. And the last point I'd make is a lot of these probably due to the fact that most organizations, or many organizations, fall in love with the tool, with the problem, not with the solution. Excuse me, with the AI, not with the problem. So they're not thinking about, well, what was the business problem, and then who needs to be part of that? So that kind of adoption, changing the workflows, as Sumeet said, and thinking about it holistically, not just thinking about activities that AI will take, but what is the ultimate outcome, and how do we need to change how we work? What new skills do people need? And then how are people actually working in new ways? So those are all things that I think are more important than the technology, because the technology is really powerful already, right? And it's, by the way, another thing that I just like to mention is this is the worst AI we'll ever have. The AI that we have right now is the worst we'll ever have, right? It's the best we've ever had, but it's also the worst we'll ever have. So it's like moving very fast. And I think just thinking about this as a fast moving train that we just have to get on and help us, our people, to get on that board as well.
Absolutely. Building on that, Henry, if you are leading a team or you're leading an organization today and you really want people to safely and intelligently adopt AI, what are, a couple of very tactical, practical things that you can do when you get back to your desk this afternoon to drive that intelligent adoption?
Yeah, well, I think you encouraged us to share something interactive. I'm wondering if I can pull up
Absolutely.
Just one graphic that I think is really powerful to illustrate this point. Yeah, we actually hosted some folks from MIT last month. They weren't the same folks as the ones at the study that went viral. But I think a couple of things on that point first is that, one, I think that there's some probably valid critiques of that particular study and the methodology. But the overall point is actually, I think, fair, is that as you look at the deployment of any new technology, whether it's automation or RPA and robotics, you get a high rate of failure at the beginning as people are launching use cases and pilots and trying to see what works. And in the case of generative AI, I think we saw a couple of things. There's kind of two different approaches that we've seen organizations use to roll it out. There's kind of this top-down approach, which is actually in the small minority of deployments, in which there's a cross-functional committee. They're really being strategic about identifying use cases, going out and looking for the technology, integrating it, some failed pilots and some viable use cases. But in a lot of the cases over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a tops-down mandate to roll out AI and roll it out as quickly as possible. And then whether it's Copilot licenses or Gemini licenses, really deploying that out and then hoping that it comes bottoms up. And you see these little balloons. Those are the viable use cases that surface organically from the organization. And that's really hard to measure because there's not that system in place to measure those returns. And it's kind of relying on people to really explore on their own. And that can work. We've seen that actually about 50% of the prompts in any organization are actually written by 5% of the people. And so it can work as long as you try to get there. But essentially what I'm trying to say is here over the last 6 to 12 months, it's very early. A lot of people are exploring different use cases. And now I think heading into 2026 is almost this revenge of the CFO, if you will, in that there's a push to measure ROI and what happened to all these dollars. But there's not actually a slowdown in the investment. There's this Wharton study that came out this week that the 88% of organizations are actually increasing AI spend. I think the difference is trying to be more disciplined around, okay, how does this tie to fundamental business strategy, and identifying those use cases, to Kathy's point, before getting into the technology itself, versus kind of running around with the hammer looking for the nail, right? And so for specific guidance to people on the call, I would really start there as you think about your metrics or your OKRs for next year. How can you potentially leverage AI or AI in conjunction with the folks in your team to really drive more returns versus kind of hoping it happens organically, which can work and certainly would try to identify those from members of your teams. But if you're looking for specific returns and really measuring those, I think that tying them back to strategy and use cases is really key here.
Thank you for walking through that. Is one of those two models better, or is your comment that both of them have value inside an organization?
Yeah, I think they both have value in that there's a lot of, I think this is a different tool than maybe other SaaS tools that have been rolled out before, in that it's very easy to get hands-on across the organization versus, other tools that have been rolled out that maybe it requires some specialized expertise. And so the people who are actually generating a lot of the best prompts and outputs are just people who are really passionate and curious. And so there's a lot of value to the bottoms up, and it also helps facilitate that culture around using these tools. I think the potential trade-off is then, if you're looking for specific results, and maybe that depends on the culture of your organization and whether you need to get those financial results reported, that's harder to do when it's bottoms up versus tops down. And so there's not necessarily a right answer. I'd just say that over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a lot of bottoms up, and then a lot of in the tops down. It's just many use cases letting 1,000 flowers bloom. And so that helps drive that 95% failure rate or whatever that number might be. And so we think about what makes sense for your organization.
I think every organization actually is doing both of them, or most organizations are deploying both of them in some cases. I think the bottom up everybody should do, right? Just giving people the AI tools. And then the top down is more prioritizing where you want to go. We see a third approach, by the way, too, that also most organizations do. It's just restricting resources, freezing headcount, so people have to do more with less. So that's another approach that I think every organization, to some aspect, is also using as well.
So, Kathi, I want to stick with you for this next question. We've had people in chat in the open Q&A ask about AI for people in L&D or HR functions specifically. So we've talked about general company deployments, talked about how it applies to all leaders, but I know a lot of the people in today's conversation work in L&D or HR. So just briefly, anything specific you would suggest to that audience for how they can be using how they can be using AI effectively?
Well, in the HR area, it's basically we studied this extensively, and most organizations start with talent acquisition. So recruiting, of course, is ripe for AI disruption because there's just so much data. Because when you think about the data, you have the data of the entire outside work, like outside population, not just for your employees. So talent acquisition, I mentioned the McDonald's case, but many, many different applications where AI could really do the entire recruiting workforce end to end. But then it's the question, how much do you want the AI to do? So where do you want to weigh in? Where do you want to have, for example, maybe what one hotel chain that we worked with calls a culture audit. So they basically do all the upfront pieces for their hotel workers with AI, and then they bring them in for kind of a group interview to see the values alignment and if they have the service orientation, and then to do the rest of it with AI. So just because you can use AI doesn't mean you should use AI. So we always advise people to look at where do you feel it's really important for you to bring the human in and to bring kind of the skills and the capabilities of humans in. So that's kind of talent acquisition, learning and development, right, for disruption. Learning tools, of course, can now take and we saw this with our own tools, a piece of content. It took us 6 months to create a great course with videos and all of that. Now you stick it into one of these AI tools and it creates a course within 2 minutes. And then you can take 2 weeks to make it better and to fine tune it and all of that. You don't have to do all the drudgery maybe to kind of create all of these screens and all these videos and all of that. So lots of opportunity then to say, well, what should we what should we develop? What skills should we develop? How can we enable the business rather than doing the doing? So many things where we can actually up-level what HR and learning and development, talent acquisition is doing and bring people to higher order roles and add more value to the business. So we're just scratching the surface here, of course, but more to come.
Perfect. So before we close, I want to go to the open Q&A, and there's a number of great questions that have come in. And so we'll just do kind of a rapid fire run through these. So this first one, Sumeet, is for you. This is a question of somebody who kind of vulnerably shares that I embrace AI because I believe of the importance of the technology, and candidly, I feel threatened. Am I right to feel threatened about AI replacing my job, and kind of how can I stay relevant over time?
Yeah, I would just say be cautious. I would, threatened is a strong word. I mean, some of these changes you have to embrace it, and if you fear too much, you kind of get stuck and you stand still. And I think the goal here is move forward. Get educated, understand how can you do what you do better. And I think that point was great. I've been working with healthcare. And we had the same conversation. Doctors that use AI will replace doctors that do not use AI. I think the point Kathi was making. And I think that's what they have to do. Everybody needs to do. How can they do something better than they do today with AI? And you got to learn more about it and get more involved in understanding how the work will get disrupted before it does. And how can you kind of amplify your potential? That's what I would say.
I think that's great. Henry, next one comes from Brian Arredondo. Today is a lot of conversation about the positive effects of AI and how AI can increase efficiency and productivity and effectiveness, et cetera. But can you be real with what are some of the potential unintended consequences or fears of AI?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that there's a couple of areas that I'd focus on. I think that you mentioned this, Will, but up front, but our team here at Grow with Google is really focused on making sure that opportunities created by technology are available to everyone. And we've been around since 2017. And as with any technology, there's that opportunity to really push ahead, but then also potentially exacerbate existing inequities. And so whether that is in the case of AI, we still have folks who don't have access to internet or broadband. We have folks who are not digitally literate. And so to suddenly supercharge humans with this additional capability, but then recognizing that this can leave folks behind is really important. And so we've been focusing on building trainings and deploying trainings and actually going around the country and making sure that small businesses and people are trained on some of these technologies, are pushing ahead. And that's huge. And I think that's something that we can all think about. And then, I think especially we've been focusing in rural communities in the heartland where some of these issues are especially acute. And I think that's some of the challenge here. And so that's probably the primary one that comes to mind. But on the other hand, I think that, if done right, this can also help close some of those gaps in getting folks access to opportunities and actually accelerating some of that progress and growth.
And we got a number of questions, Henry, from people who are interested in AI but are not particularly familiar. And so they're actually probably perfect candidates for the types of training that you're describing right now. Where should people go? What's the URL that people should go to dive into the trainings that Google has created?
Yeah, I think we have, we've developed a number of courses that are free or low cost. So grow.google/AI has a comprehensive list of all our AI courses. And then we've actually uploaded a number of them for free on YouTube. And so if you Google Grow with Google or Grow with Google AI courses on YouTube, that's a really good starting point. And then a lot of the tools, whether it's Gemini or Notebook LM, can be accessed for free for folks. And so that's a great place to get started. Or if you know people who are apprehensive, aren't quite leaning in, and there's that risk of falling behind, I think encouraging others to try exploring, I think is really, really important.
Wonderful. So the last audience question, and I saw, by the way, somebody added that the link to grow.google.ai in chat. So that's great. People should jump into that. And Google, just grow with Google, and you'll find the courses and certificate programs there. So the final question from the audience is I'm going to send to Kathi, and it's around trust. How can people, this question specifically is around organizational design professionals. Well, let's broaden that to leaders. How can leaders ensure that people trust each other within organizations, even as they are aggressively rolling out AI?
Well, and trust is such a great question, because trust becomes even more important, of course, in a world of AI, right? And if people, we've always seen every study that we do on what's driving employee experience and what's driving kind of a great employee value proposition, trust in leadership and trust in the organization always comes out on top. So it's even more important to drive trust, and trust, of course, it's a two-way street, right? So if we see that if the employees see that we trust them, they'll trust us as leaders. So I know there's oftentimes the inclination maybe to mandate AI tool use, for example. Let's just say that some organizations might say, okay, now we're at the point where we have to force people to do that, and we're going to monitor that and all of that. Well, that shows you actually don't trust employees, right? So I think the more you can show people that you trust them, the more they're going to trust you. And I think the other thing that comes with trust, there's actually three components to trust. It's transparency, it's communication, and it's competence. So basically, always being transparent, communicating consistently, and showing that you actually know what you're doing, but then also admit when you don't know the answer, because let's be honest, we all don't know where AI is going to go. None of us knows, right? So I think admitting that and being very transparent to say we're going to use it to the best of that we can and the best of our capabilities, but then also keeping kind of the employees at the center of all of it, I think will really go a long way.
Wonderful. So let's close with a final question and I'll start, Sumeet, with you on this one. What is the one piece of advice that you have for leaders on today's call to not just survive, but thrive in the age of AI?
My one advice is momentum. Keep moving. Don't stand still. Seek clarity. Embrace change. Be cautious. Be guarded. I'm not saying don't do that, but but don't stand still. There's a lot to learn. There's lots to grow with. And one thing we don't talk about with AI that you can do as leaders is growth. We talk a lot about efficiency, about productivity, and if this technology and the promise of it works, we should grow what we do in society, solve some of our biggest problems and challenges. Society and healthcare is a good example. So, bring some of those lenses into the discussion as leaders. You can do that. It's not enough of that is going on today.
Awesome. Same question to you, Henry. What is the one piece of advice you have for leaders about how to thrive in the age of AI?
Yeah, I think staying curious is good. I think in the professional setting and in the personal setting, I think a lot of the learnings I've had around AI tools is actually just playing in my free time, whether it is creating storybooks for my little 5-month-old using Gemini, or as we're learning about childbirth, using Notebook LM to try to digest a lot of dense information. I use some of the live AI tools to practice my pretty mediocre Spanish and Chinese. And so a lot of that experimentation and curiosity can help blend across the personal and professional setting. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of change very quickly. And so staying curious in your own exploration, but also talking to others around what they're doing. I think that's really, really key.
Wonderful. And Kathi, to you to close out.
Well, I would say think about the people. It's all about the people. For us as leaders, even more so today, because the human connections that we can make are more important than ever when we have AI tools. So we all crave more than ever being connected with others, not being isolated, not being being part of a community and building that team. So think about the people. Go people first, not AI first.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to the three of you. The chat has been blowing up the entire conversation with appreciation and recognition of your incredible insights. And so I just want to echo that. So if you're chatting in right now, if you could share some appreciation for 3 amazing guests, Sumeet, Kathi, Henry, you all were phenomenal today. Thank you so much. So to close, I just want to share, I had a few takeaways from today's conversation I wanted to wrap up with. First, great leaders do not treat AI as a replacement for people. They treat it as a way to amplify people. Second, great leaders do not resist change. They embrace change. They adapt in real time, and they keep learning as the world evolves. They lean into that curiosity. And third, great leaders are balancing efficiency with humanity. They are ensuring that technology strengthens trust rather than breaks it. These insights, today's conversation matters because this question of how we balance technology and humanity, this question of how we intelligently adopt AI is one of the defining leadership challenges that we face in this current era. And the difference between effectively or poorly applying AI is going to be enormous for our personal careers, but also for our teams and for the organizations we work at. Our research finds that 80% of leaders are taking a hands-off approach to AI. This is not a moment to bury your head in the sand. This is not a moment to simply roll the balls out and let the kids play. Great, important moments require great, important leaders. For our conversation of the last couple of days, where have all the great leaders gone? This is a moment that requires great leadership. And so I challenge all of you in the audience to meet this moment with intentionality and to really think proactively about how you will embrace AI personally and how you will embrace adopting AI inside of your team and organization. To that end, I have 2 exciting solutions that I want to introduce. So FranklinCovey obviously is here to help you all on this AI adoption and implementation journey. First, we have a solution for individuals across an entire organization called Working with AI, the Essentials for Working Smarter Together. This interactive solution will help individuals develop the confidence and the mindsets to combine their intelligence with AI's intelligence to create this hybrid intelligence that unlocks their potential to drive measurable and vast impact. The second solution that we're launching is called Leading AI Adoption, Accelerate AI Impact Through Empathy and Action. This solution is specifically designed for leaders, and it's really helping leaders model the confidence and the mindsets. It's helping leaders create safety on their teams. It's helping leaders identify opportunity and celebrate wins for AI implementation. So we have a poll question open right now. If you would like to learn more about either of these 2 solutions and potentially bring them to your organization to drive the intelligent and effective adoption of AI, please let us know and we'll follow up accordingly.